Hello everyone and welcome to Slash Film Daily for September 14th, 2018. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news, and in the spoiler room later, we'll be discussing the problems and the ending of The Predator and how it changed from its original script. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
Okay, guys, we only got a little bit of news today before we get into the spoiler room goodness. Let's start things off with a story that broke while we were on the podcast yesterday. And if you heard the tail end of the podcast, you heard my reaction as I learned that Aaron Paul, star of Breaking Bad, has been cast in Westworld Season 3. Ben, what do we know?
That's kind of all we know. We know that Aaron Paul is going to be a series regular in season 3 of Westworld. We don't know if he's going to be involved in more seasons beyond that, if it's sort of a one and done thing just for season 3. We don't even know what kind of character he's going to be playing, if he's going to be a human or an android, a host character. As you might expect, Westworld is keeping things pretty close to the vest there. That's a show that is obviously built very much on mysteries and things like that. So I'm not remotely surprised that they didn't just come out and say what kind of character Aaron Paul is going to be. And I also wouldn't even be surprised if he is presented one way in the beginning of the show, and then, there's some sort of big reveal about his character, the nature of his character as the series progresses. So I don't know. It's a very threadbare announcement, but I'm really mad at this because I pretty much swore off this show after season 2, which I was not a fan of. And I really like Aaron Paul as an actor, so his presence might be enough to bring me back and force me to hate watch all of season 3, which is an experience I was expecting to just skip over and pleasantly go on with the rest of my life without thinking about Westworld again. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. But what do you guys think about this?
I don't know. I can't even imagine what kind of character he's going to play. I mean, I could totally see him as a character in Westworld, like an actual, Western character. Not that, the show is going to be taking place all primarily in that world. I don't know. Chris, what do you think?
I think he's probably going to be someone outside of the park. He just strikes me as too modern. I mean, I know Westworld isn't set in the past really, but Westworld itself is a very past-oriented place. It's meant to be. You
couldn't see him as a Young Guns kind of outlaw character.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just so used to him on Breaking Bad, where he's so modern and when I've seen him in person, I saw him at Comic-Con where he was talking. He pretty much talks exactly like he talked on Breaking Bad. He has that very modern way of speaking. So I can't really picture him being like an old-timey cowboy, but, I don't know.
But I can't also picture him being one of the guys in charge of Delos or anything. Do you know what I mean? He's kind of, he often plays kind of fuck-ups on TV and film. What kind of role do you see him in this Nolan series?
I really don't know. I mean, Westworld ended on such a strange note last season. I don't even know what they're going to do with this new season, but I could easily see him as someone just in the outside world who maybe works for the company or maybe, knows someone who works for the company. I don't know. It really depends on how big his part is going to be. I mean, I feel like he's a big enough actor that they wouldn't cast him for a small part. So I'm guessing it's going to be a major part, but I really don't know.
It could be interesting to see him play an Elon Musk type, some sort of rival technological developer to Delos. That might be interesting. And in the broadest sense, without really spoiling anything about...
We don't know who is trying to steal Delos's intellectual property. So, you could be onto something.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, in the broadest sense, we don't, without spoiling anything, the second season ends in a way where the quote-unquote real world is definitely going to play a much larger role in the next season. So I think the odds are probably in favor of him playing just a regular run-of-the-mill human character instead of a host or maybe a Delos employee. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens.
For sure. Let's move on to the box office. We'll start off first with The Predator, which comes out this weekend. And, guys, with all like this, the buzz coming off the earlier reviews not being that high, and there was kind of like the production, I don't want to say problems, like they reshot the entire ending of the film, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I didn't think that they were going to make that much money. I thought this was going to be kind of a failure for Fox, but apparently not. Chris, tell us about it.
Yeah, early tracking indicates that first of all, this will definitely win the weekend. It's going to beat pretty much everything else opening this weekend, and it's also on track to make somewhere between 25 and 32 million opening weekend. And if it does, that'll make it the highest opening weekend for any Predator film ever. The others weren't bombs; they just didn't do this well. So, 32 million isn't exactly, a whopping number, but it's very good. And, all signs indicate this is going to be a hit of some kind. Well, whether or not that drops off the second weekend remains to be seen.
Yeah, another bit of box office tracking that broke today is that Venom, which is officially rated PG-13, is tracking to opening to a much higher figure than I thought. I mean, I don't know anybody on this world that is excited for this movie. But Ben, tell us, how big of an opening weekend is Venom likely to have?
Yeah, so right now the latest tracking numbers suggest that it could open anywhere between $60 to $70 million for its opening weekend. So that's a pretty huge number. I mean, as Chris was just saying, 30 million is sort of like so, but 60 to 70 million especially for a movie like this that has, the marketing for this movie has just been baffling all around. I still cannot believe that turd in the wind line is actually something that made the cut, and that they were proud enough to put in the actual trailer for the movie. And like you were saying, Peter, I just don't know who this movie appeals to outside of like 12-year-old boys, but I don't know, maybe there's like a whole swath of people out there that we just are, that are not in our circles, that are really jazzed about a full Venom movie. But yeah, this movie
I don't even think this looks cool to 12-year-old boys.
Not that I know. I don't know, man. This is completely baffling to me. And also, just to tack on to the Venom thing, that we know that now that the movie is officially rated PG-13. So there was there's been a lot of back and forth about whether it was gonna be an R-rated movie or go to PG-13. Eric Davis from Fandango says that he's hearing from his studio sources that the reason is that Venom and Spider-Man might face off at some point down the line. So if you give him an R rating in his first solo movie, it's hard to sort of downgrade, quote unquote, to a PG-13 later on when you've already established this character as like, a Deadpool or Logan type, somebody with a foul mouth and who's biting off people's heads on screen. I guess all that stuff is going to happen off screen now because this movie's going to be PG-13. But this whole thing, this entire movie seems like a mess to me. So I'm shocked that it's tracking as well as it is.
Yeah, I'm shocked. I mean, this is like Ant-Man and the Wasp type opening weekend numbers, which were pretty good. Chris, do you know anybody that is excited to see this movie?
No, I have no idea who wants to see this. I really don't, and I don't know. I'm wondering if this is going to be like incorrect, because I remember Solo was tracking really well too, and then it ended up opening below expectations. So I'm wondering if this tracking is not accurate, and it's, the actual total is going to be a lot lower. But I don't know, man. I can only speak for myself, but this looks terrible. It doesn't look even like slightly good, and the fact that there seems to be positive buzz about it is shocking. But to each their own. Maybe there are people out there who are really excited for Venom, but I'm not one of them.
I think somebody at the playlist said that this movie reminds them a lot of like the superhero movies from the early 2000s, like a Daredevil type of thing. Yeah. And I thought that was a really astute comparison. Like that's exactly what this looks like, is a movie from 10 or 15 years ago.
But like, as I mentioned, with AMC A-List, I'm seeing a lot of movies in theaters with trailers now. And every time that this trailer for Venom comes up on screen, at least someone in the audience makes a loudly vocal, making fun of the movie, joke during the trailer. Like, I don't know, it just seems to be mocked by everybody. But maybe we're stuck in our film Twitter bubble, and also, Ben and I are stuck in their LA bubble, which is another bubble on itself of the film community. So I don't know, maybe we just aren't in tune with what's going on in Middle America. I'm curious if anybody out there is super excited to see Venom. Tell us why. Send us an email at peter@slashfilm.com. I would be interested to hear your reasonings why you think this movie doesn't look like crap. But yeah, let's move on to our final news story. And this news story, I guess, might have spoilers for Solo: A Star Wars Story. So if you care about that, you might want to skip ahead or turn off now. But basically, the co-writer of the movie, John Kasdan, took to Twitter and revealed a bunch of facts about the making of the film. And there was also some concept art revealed. Chris, you wrote this up for the site. Why don't you tell us the most interesting bits of info we got from this, like, I think it's like a 6-page document or something.
It's a lot. Yeah, there are 52 facts total here, and some are more interesting than others. But overall, it's neat because he said, Jonathan Kasdan said on Twitter that, this is basically his version of a commentary track. The Solo Blu-ray / digital release unfortunately does not come with a commentary track, so this is the next best thing, and that's kind of cool. There's a lot of talk of other influences here. He brings up Michael Mann movies at least twice, so Michael Mann apparently played a big part in influencing how they approached Solo, specifically the
so Michael Mann influenced both The Dark Knight and Solo: A Star Wars Story.
He influences everything, really. But specifically, they talk about how Paul Bettany's character is heavily influenced by the quote unquote villain in Michael Mann's Thief, and I actually hadn't made that connection, but now that I read him say that, I actually totally see where he's coming from with that. And also, they said Woody Harrelson's character is modeled on Robert De Niro's character in Heat, which I really don't see at all, but I'll take his word for it. What I liked most about this list is it's refreshingly honest. Like he's open about stuff that some people might not like. And this is a spoiler, obviously, but one of the things I did not like about this movie is I felt it really wasted Thandie Newton, who is a great actress, and she's in this movie for like 3 minutes and then she dies. And I thought that was a huge waste of her talents. And he even says here that, it was probably a mistake to cast her in that role because she's so good, you want more of her, and she's gone before you even get to know who she is. So I appreciate that he was willing to acknowledge that, yes, that was a dumb move on the part of Solo: A Star Wars Story.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about this list is usually in Hollywood, when a film comes out, there isn't the people involved don't really usually give credit to, like, oh, this came out of this draft from this writer, or like that kind of thing. It's kind of I don't know if it's just like the politics of Hollywood. You just don't usually do that, especially when there's problems with the movie. And this list quite often gives credit to, this part of the movie is credited to Lawrence Kasdan, who, came up with this thing, or, Lord Miller had this great idea for this. So you're actually getting a sense of, where ideas from Ron Howard came in, or where, what the original ideas from Lord Miller were, which is fascinating because I think a lot of people that did not like this movie like to kind of be like, Disney neutered it, that they ruined it by neutering Lord Miller's vision, and not that we don't know that's the case or not, but it's interesting to hear that some of these things that like a lot of people did not like about the movie, like they didn't like Chewbacca, being in that how Han meets Chewbacca. That was all Lord Miller. So there's a bunch of stuff giving credit to Lord Miller that I think people might be surprised about. Not to say that if they had directed those scenes, it might not have played better or not. But I don't know. I think it's just interesting to see, which ideas are attributed to, which artists. But you can read that whole list on slashfilm.com alongside some new concept art. Chris, is there anything interesting in this new concept art?
The most interesting thing is there's a drawing of an Ewok, so there was a chance we almost got an Ewok in Solo, but again, concept art happens very early. It doesn't always reflect what was going to be in the movie, so there's a chance this never got past this stage, but it would have been cool to have just an Ewok somewhere in Solo, even for like a brief moment.
And I love this piece of concept art because someone's almost like using has the Ewok on a leash like a dog, like a rabid dog. Another alien creature. I do know that like there was some set photos like that leaked out early in the production when Lord and Miller were still on the film, and in Dresden's office, or Dryden. What's his?
Dryden Voss.
Dryden Voss. Sorry, I'm not sure why I said Dresden. In Dryden's office, in one of the cases, the display cases, was originally a skinned and stuffed Ewok. And that was when these set photos leaked on TMZ. But in their finished film that we got from Ron Howard, I think there was like maybe a Mandalorian armor in that case or something. So yeah, things change all the time. And next up, we're going to enter the spoiler room and talk about The Predator. And for that segment, I'm going to bring on Slash Film weekend editor, Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Okay, before we get into it all, let's say that major spoilers for The Predator coming up, because we're going to be talking about the ending. We're going to be talking about a lot of plot points, so you might want to save this bit until you've seen the movie this weekend. Save this on your iTunes podcast app, and come back to it after you've seen the movie, because we have a bunch to talk about. Brad, you saw this movie last night. What did you think?
I actually really enjoyed it. I was expecting it not to be that great, but I had a lot of fun watching it. I didn't think it was quite as messy as some people had said. It at least didn't feel that way to me. It had a nice flow to it. It was nonstop action. I thought the ensemble was great together. There were definitely some questionable CG shots that I think could have been improved. Specifically, some close-ups of some of the Ultimate Predator's face. But otherwise, I just had a lot of fun watching it, and it felt like basically like exactly what I expected from Shane Black directing a Predator movie, and I had a lot of fun with it. That's really all I can say.
So, Chris, when you were on the podcast earlier this week, you gave us a one-line reaction to The Predator. You called it fun but dumb. Can you expand upon that for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a surprisingly funny movie. Like, this is more of a comedy than anything else, which I don't think I was fully expecting, even though I know, Shane Black is really good at writing, funny stuff. I wasn't expecting it to be pretty much a straight up comedy. And that's really how I thought it played. There's stuff I like. A lot of the humor is good. A lot of the humor is also terrible. Like anything involving Thomas Jane's character who has Tourette syndrome. They keep, like, ha ha ha, yes, Tourette syndrome, like that. It's all really, really bad. I mean, I won't even get into how it's offensive, because the whole movie is pretty much leading into being offensive, but just the humor is just terrible. It's not good at all. And I wish it had just not made it into the film. And I kept like waiting, even though I like Tom Jane, I was like, boy, I hope he dies really soon, because I'm getting sick of this running joke here. Beyond that, there was stuff, I enjoyed. I enjoyed the humor. I enjoyed how breezy it is. It's a very fast movie. Like there's almost no fat on the film, and some of that is not great. It doesn't work into the film's favor, because you can tell they probably cut down a lot of stuff to make it very streamlined and very quick. And so on some levels, I wish there had been a bit more character development here and there. But on the other hand, I liked how quickly the movie moved, and I liked how it really did feel like a throwback to films of the 80s. Like this felt a lot like The Monster Squad to me. Not as good as The Monster Squad, which is a much better movie, but this feels a lot like that. And, that's appropriate enough, because both Shane Black and Fred Decker, who wrote The Monster Squad, wrote this. Beyond that, the ending is atrocious, and
we'll talk about that in a few seconds.
Actually, the comedy aspect you're talking about kind of fits in with the idea that it feels like an 80s throwback movie. And I think that Shane Black actually did a really good job of tapping into, like, kind of bringing back the comedic style and, you know, politically incorrectness of that decade into this movie, which isn't necessarily a wise idea, you know, in this more socially conscious time. But I do think that the way that he used that sense of humor and tied it to, you know, these soldiers with PTSD, because honestly, that's like how a lot of, you know, Army guys do joke around with each other. Like, they make inappropriate jokes and they're totally dicks to each other. And I feel like that kind of worked in making those characters feel more authentic in that way.
Ben and I both gave our reactions on the water cooler episode earlier this week, but to sum it up, I thought this movie was a lot of fun until like the midpoint, and then I felt it came off the rails in a major way and got really, really dumb. Ben, can you sum up your thoughts in like a sentence or two?
Yeah, pretty much echoing what you and Chris have said. I think the back quarter of the movie is like almost a full-out disaster. But there are some things I like about the film, and I think as much as I am sort of right there with Chris in terms of Thomas Jane's character, I feel like his relationship with Keegan-Michael Key actually worked for me. Like the ending, since we're in full spoiler territory here, the ending with those two characters shooting each other, I feel like that is it's one of those moments that should not work, and it probably won't work for a lot of people, but for some reason it just worked for me. Like I felt like they did enough legwork to establish that relationship, and it just seemed like the kind of heightened thing that those two characters would do in this situation, in this weird world that they're living in. So I appreciated that. But in terms of like I mean, one thing that I think is very obvious is like, it seemed like there were moments that the studio implemented decisions that Shane Black would not have done. Like there's a moment specifically where one of the big reveals of the movie is that Rory McKenna, who's the character played by Jacob Tremblay, is actually the one that the ultimate predator is after. We think that it's Quinn McKenna, who is Boyd Holbrook's character, because he's like the soldier and like one of the big protagonists of the movie, but it's actually the ultimate predator is looking for this kid because he's autistic and he is like the next level of human evolution, or so the movie explains. And there's this moment where the audience makes that realization, and the super predator or ultimate predator specifically calls out like and says, you know, this is what I want. I want the kid, not you. And then Olivia Munn's character has to come on and like basically spell it out again right afterwards. And it's one of those things where like, you just showed, you didn't need to also then tell. And it was one of those things that struck me as like, oh, this is the studio forcing this in just for, you know, they're playing to the cheap seats, basically, making sure that every single person in the theater is fully aware of what's going on, even though it was painfully obvious from the very beginning. And like anybody who's ever seen a movie before knew what was going on, you know, 40 minutes earlier. So I don't know, I'm very, very mixed about this movie.
Yeah, I always hate when that happens in a movie, especially when, like, in a movie, they, like, do a, you know, few second flashback to something that just happened, like, 30 minutes before or something.
Right.
It's always frustrating. Okay, I have some questions for you guys, because there was a lot about this movie that kind of dumbfounded me. Like, I agree with Brad in some ways that, you know, this movie is, Brad and Chris, that this movie is the best, like, kind of recapturing those 80s and 90s action movies. But I think it actually captures them in both the good and the bad ways. And with the bad, we get a lot of baffling decisions here. Okay, so my first question to you guys is, this first predator that comes to Earth is supposedly coming to Earth to bring a gift to help prevent the humans from getting wiped out by the predators, right? Why does he show up on Earth and immediately start killing army men?
I mean, he doesn't show up with the intention of killing, but he's like, he's there and he's like being restrained. And so he feels threatened.
Oh, you're talking about in the woods before he even gets restrained?
Like, I don't even think we see him restrained. Don't we see, like, that body, like, hung up before we even see the restraint? I don't know.
I mean, I'll just add that I think this is the dumbest thing in the movie, so I think it was not clearly thought out well.
Okay, let me move on to my next question then to you guys. Sterling K. Brown I think this was like his worst role in anything ever, by the way.
Really?
But
He's my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, he's the MVP of this movie. He's so good in this movie.
I don't know.
I wanted a whole movie with just him. He was fantastic. I can't believe you didn't like it.
I like him normally, and I thought he was just a generic villain
he's
guy.
got so much swagger, and he's like such a smart ass. He's just like he's a cool fucking character.
Okay, what happened to him at the end of the movie? Like at one point he just like disappeared. Did I miss something?
No, he has the shoulder gun from Predator's using, and he turns to look at the ultimate Predator, and the gun is intuitive, and so it shoots his own head off.
Yeah, it's very quick, so I can understand it if you miss it. But yeah, that is.
Wait,
what
so
happens.
so he puts the gun on his shoulder, and then the gun just shoots his head off for no reason?
No. He'd already been using it, but because it reacts to your motions and it shoots at whatever you're looking at and you perceive as a threat, the Predator was in the line of sight of the gun, and his head was between the Predator and the gun, so it accidentally shot his own head off.
Yeah, he should have swiveled his whole body toward the threat instead of just turning his head. But yeah, it was very quick. Like if you look down for 2 seconds, you could miss that. So.
Yeah, a friend of mine even saw it, and he was just confused as to what happened because it's so fast.
Yeah, I was so confused because he like just disappeared all of a sudden. Okay, and in that vein, there was one point in this movie, I think like halfway through this movie, all of a sudden our heroes, the PTSD loonies, just show up in these cars. Like one of them's in a police car, one's in an RV, and we have no idea how they got them. It's never explained or even hinted at. Is it explained?
I mean, it doesn't really need to be. They leave McKenna's wife's house, and they're trying to just catch up with them and track down their son. So they've each stolen a vehicle to get around town.
I think at one point McKenna even says like, "Go get some wheels" or something, and they just come back with those. And it's
you're right. Yeah, after they leave the RV, like he tells them to like, yeah, go get some wheels.
I don't know. I was just so confused when that guy showed up in the police vehicle.
Okay. Did you watch the movie?
I did watch the movie. Okay. Okay, let's get into the timeline of this movie because I'm really confused with this, guys. The movie starts off in Mexico. Then it's at a VA hospital in Tennessee, right? And then it's at this Georgia motel, which I've done some searching online, and it turns out that the hotel is not in Georgia. It's just that all the cars have Georgia tags, and the production was too lazy to fix that mistake. And then suddenly they're at the kid's house on a farm somewhere, like California somewhere, and then back to Mexico, all in 24 to 48 hours.
Do they ever say the names of those places? I feel like they don't really specify where they are. So
yeah.
Okay, well, we do know this like at the beginning of the movie takes place in some rural like Mexican village, right? And he sends a package which clears customs, gets sent to the suburban house wherever, California, Maryland, whatever it is, goes to a P.O. box, then gets rerouted to his estranged wife's house, all before the main character has had a chance to go poop.
Peter, I feel like you're drilling down on some of these details.
Yeah, this is weird.
I don't know. Everybody I saw the movie with was like baffled by this because like
it sounds like you're thinking more about this than everyone who made the movie. Honestly.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you in terms of like nitpicking because I can pick nits with the best of them, but I feel like especially with you guys just talking about how this movie is sort of a throwback to 80s films, you could do make a lot of the same logical leaps about a ton of movies that came out in the 80s and 90s. So I think this is not too far outside the realm of possibility. It's just like one of those movie things that has to happen.
And there's plenty of passage of time between him sending the package from Mexico to when we see him again to think that he could have been.
He says he pooped it out.
What?
Doesn't he say he pooped the thing out like near the end of the movie? Like, am I wrong there?
I mean, he does do that, but at the same time,
unless he like pooped it out earlier and then re-ate it.
Have you ever heard of Next Day Air?
Yeah, but Next Day Air goes to the P.O. box and gets rerouted. Okay, whatever. I know this is a nitpick, but it's just I'm confused about the timeline here, and I just don't understand it at all. Okay, how about this one, guys?
How did the Predator get to Earth?
No. How about this, guys?
See, was there a spaceship or
The Predator? Okay, Olivia Munn is left. The Predator flies with his spaceship, or the Predator spaceship flies and crashes far away, and somehow she's there 30 seconds later.
Who? Olivia Munn?
Yeah.
Yeah, when she comes out, when she's got that hero shot where she comes out of the invisibility. We don't know exactly where that ship flew. Maybe,
especially since it was swirling and falling, so it could have easily gone back towards where it came from. There's no frame of reference for the distance that it covers.
Yeah, that's the thing, is the geography in a lot of the movie, as Peter's just been talking about, it is sort of unclear, and maybe it's deliberately so, and especially anything that happens at the end, because we know that there were so many reshoots there. I feel like they may have edited the movie to be purposefully vague, so people wouldn't be thinking about stuff like that, but it seems to have had the opposite effect on Peter.
Okay, so let me get this clear. The 7-year-old autistic kid, who's a genius, has no problem decoding the alien language, using their interfaces without any, instructions, and somehow at the end of the movie ends up at a job at a top-secret U.S. alien... Area 51 base?
Again, this is a stupid movie.
Yeah, it's he's on the spectrum, and he has savant tendencies, and so he's able to decipher the patterns and things like that to help him figure out how to use their technology. It's not really that big of a leap in logic.
You just got to go with it, Peter. It's an idiotic film.
It's one of that's a suspension of your disbelief thing. But are we going to talk about how awful the ending is?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. I just had one more thing I wanted to say, guys. About this autistic kid, they set him up with him being afraid of these loud noises, and I'm like, oh, that's smart. He's this kind of genius, that eventually is going to have to, have a situation where there's loud noises going on, and he's still going to have to save the day, and that never comes. What was the setup of the loud noises?
That's not really how autism works. Some people who are on the spectrum.
No, I get that, but this is a movie.
Right.
It seemed like that was a setup for something. No,
that's just how, it was setting up that he is on the spectrum and that he has autism.
I was right there with you on that one, Peter. I was sure that was going to come back in some way, and it ended up not. So I wonder if that was one of the things that may have been excised from an initial ending. But
I feel like that creates a problematic depiction of autism, because it's not like it's something that people that are on the spectrum can easily overcome just because they're faced with that situation.
You bring up a good point, but I don't think anything in the rest of this movie indicates that Shane Black has has given any thought to the proper depictions of somebody with autism or anybody with any sort of mental health issues. So I'm not sure how well that argument holds up.
Okay, let's get to the ending. Brad, you wrote this article about the ending. Walk us through the ending and what happens.
So the very last scene we see is Quinn McKenna, Boyd Holbrook's character, and his son Rory. They've survived, and Quinn has just arrived at some high-tech military facility, and we find out that his son has been there for some time. And so when he goes to see where his son is at, they've been working on figuring out how to open this device or container that the first predator that arrived on Earth in this movie brought to humans, that is apparently supposed to be something to help them defend against any other predators that might come to Earth. And so they're trying to decipher it, figure out how to open it. They think they've cracked it as soon as Quinn gets there, and his son says it says something that it's basically like a predator killer. And so they open it up, and this thing floats out of it. It's some kind of mechanical thing. There's this black goo that's sliding off of it, which almost makes you think that it might be something xenomorph related and tied to Alien versus Predator. But then all of a sudden it lunges at one of the scientists nearby, latches onto his arm, and suddenly encases him in this armor that makes him look like a cross between Predator and War Machine. All this metal all over him, glowing red eyes, 2 huge cannons on each shoulder, and just huge hulking weapon that they can use. And I don't know why, because it's very obvious. One of the scientists said, "What the hell is that?" And McKenna, he was like, "That's my new suit." It's like, "Hope it comes in 42 long," and like basically teases like that there's a sequel where they're going to use that suit to kick Predator ass.
Okay, guys, Chris, talk about the ending. What do you think?
It's awful. It's so bad. It all of it is bad. There's not even a single thing in this ending that's like, oh, that's cool. No, there's nothing that works here. I mean, first of all, it's clearly a reshoot because it doesn't fit with the rest of the film at all. I'm pretty sure even like Jacob Tremblay has like a different haircut. It's like really, it doesn't fit. And the whole like, that's my new suit just made me die inside when he said it. It's just like, just stop it. We don't, it feels so unnecessary. It feels like, you know.
And I could just imagine you're seeing this at a film festival, you know, surrounded by movies of like, you know, great artistic merit. And then you're subjected to this ending of the movie.
Yeah, it was also at midnight, so it was like 2 a.m. I just wanted to leave. And it was just like, all right, enough of this scene, please.
You know, I don't want to see it. Well, if they make a sequel to this movie, I don't want to see a sequel with a human in a predator suit fighting a predator. That's just.
Oh, I 100% want to see that movie. I want to see that movie, balls to the wall, nuts, like fighting a bunch of predators. I thought this ending was.
I mean, I'm cool with humans with predator tech, but like, I don't even think you'd be able to tell the difference between them. It would be very hard.
No, this was. I thought this ending was just perfectly like dumb for this movie, and I loved it. It was so bonkers and ridiculous that I just thought it was so cool.
By the way, I'm seeing a lot of reaction online. It's kind of like the reaction around M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, where a lot of people are theorizing that Shane Black purposely made a bad movie. Ben, what is your thoughts?
I don't know about that, but I think you could easily say that, like we've said already, that he made like a throwback kind of movie. I don't know if he like tanked the film on purpose. That doesn't really make a ton of sense unless you start getting into like conspiracy theory territory. Yeah. But yeah.
At one point, we knew that like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like they wanted him to appear in this movie. Could the original version have had him in the pod? Actually, Brad.
It's funny you say that, Peter. So we wrote a whole article about what the original ending for this movie was, and it has a similar effect as far as setting up a sequel, but it's not nearly as ridiculous. So apparently the original ending, as written by Shane Black and Fred Decker, is that after Rory and Quinn and Olivia Munn's character, Casey Beckett, have survived the battle with the Ultimate Predator and defeated it, they're still in the middle of the woods. They're kind of catching their breath. All of a sudden, this helicopter shows up out of nowhere and lands nearby. Somebody gets off of it and walks towards them. It's none other than Dutch from the original Predator, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character. And he tells all of them that he wants them to come with him. And Rory, the kid's like, he's like, me too. And he's like, especially you. Cut to black. So it's still a setup that, you know, Rory's character is kind of this key to like helping them figure out, you know, how to defeat the Predator and that kind of thing. It's not quite as ridiculous because there's no Iron Man Predator suit. But that would have been a cool thing, especially for fans of the original Predator, to bring back Arnold Schwarzenegger. But as he said in April of 2017, when he announced that he had turned down a role in the Predator, the role was too small for him, and he wanted something more significant, so he turned it down, which is kind of a dick move to like try and make a role bigger for him when the movie is not about him anymore. Especially since it would have set up a sequel that likely would have involved Schwarzenegger in some way. But you know, there's no saying that they still can't bring him back in some capacity if there is a sequel to the Predator.
That would have been a better ending. I mean, not that it would have been a good ending, but it would have been a much better ending.
I think that there's actually an even better and more ridiculous ending that I thought. Like, when I was in the middle of watching it and I was waiting to find out what was inside this container, I was like, there's no fucking way this is going to happen. I was like, but holy shit, like, what if it did? Because the container that this weapon is in is kind of shaped like this futuristic coffin, or like something that would have held a body. And I thought there was going to be some kind of creature in it, some kind of drone like they could use to, hunt the predator or something. But then I also thought, I was like, holy shit, what if there's a fucking Terminator in that case, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator, and then like it would have to exist in an alternate timeline, but it would have been awesome if they had this like backstory that they eventually explained where the Predator somehow got a hold of Dutch's DNA and used it to create this and used his DNA somehow to create like this Terminator, and like this Predator sent it back to the humans to use against them. And then we would have had Terminator versus Predator.
Okay, you've won. Ben, what do you think?
I mean, that sounds like it definitely would have been ridiculous. I think if there wasn't another Terminator movie already in development, I think there was probably a higher likelihood of maybe something like that happening. All of the rights are with different studios, so there would have had to been some sort of secret agreement to make that happen. But just from a purely artistic level, that could have been fun. I think I also thought the same thing, Brad, that there was going to be a body inside that thing because it looks so much like a coffin, or at least some sort of container that would hold a body. And I thought that maybe the Schwarzenegger thing was just a ruse. His quote about not being in the movie, I was like, holy crap, did they get him anyway? And he's just gonna, rise up out of this thing as Dutch, and then that ended up not happening either. So, that was my quick flash of a thought before we finally saw the real ending.
By the way, guys, I know I didn't get to this, but I hate this whole alien translator thing, like Predator translator. Like, I don't want the humans created this computer program that can translate what the predators are saying. I don't know. It just really bothers me. I don't know why, but it just seems
Sounds like you had a lot of problems with this one, Peter.
Yeah, I had a lot of problems in that last, third of the movie. Chris, what could have saved this movie for you?
Oh man, I don't even know. I do think the Dutch ending would definitely have, at least on a fan service level, had worked a lot better than what we got here. I don't think it even needed that. It's like a coda they tack on where it's like, here's what happened after. Like, I don't think it could have just the original Predator. It ends literally. They just Arnold Schwarzenegger and the female character whose name I can't remember. They get on a helicopter and that's it. The movie's over. Like, we don't need an epilogue. I felt like that really is was stupid.
But that's the difference. Back in the 80s, you could just end the movie right in the climactic moment. Like, in Karate Kid when Daniel, spoilers for the Karate Kid, but when Daniel wins the karate tournament, the movie just ends with a still frame of Mr. Miyagi looking at Daniel, having won this tournament. It just ends suddenly.
I do wonder if there's a different ending that they were going to go with originally and end it in the forest there, because there's a shot from the trailers where Quinn McKenna, Boyd Holbrook, is looking up at the sky, and there's a line that he says, "Come and get us, motherfucker." And it's clearly from the end of the movie because it's lighter out. And you can see Rory's jacket next to him, and so it's clearly from then. And I wonder if there was something different there, where they kind of just that the setup was originally maybe there was a call that was put out from that Predator, calling the other hybrid predators to come to Earth and that kind of thing, and that was how they set up the sequel instead.
Maybe that could be. I don't know. I'm really curious after seeing this movie what Shane Black's original vision was. So if anybody has that script, please send it to me at peter@slashfilm.com. I'd love to check it out. Do you guys have any last thoughts? Does anybody want to talk about the horrible CG?
Not really. I feel like we've beaten this horse.
Yeah.
It
seems to me that Fox was just second guessing Shane Black at every moment, and these reshoots happened, and forcing him to go into post-production at the latest possible moment, resulting in this bad CG and mess of an ending. But that's just what I think. So that brings us to the end of today's Slash Film Daily. You can find all of our work on slashfilm.com. You can find all the stories we've talked about today on slashfilm.com and linked in the show notes. You can subscribe to this podcast, Slash Film Daily, on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to Peter at slashfilm.com. We will have a mailbag episode, I think, next week. So if you have any, questions to us about our favorite or least favorite movies and that kind of sort of thing, send it there and it'll probably make it on the air. Please go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, I have one last question for you guys. So they have his son, right, on the spaceship. And they come in knowing that this predator's coming and start killing off all these government people that could help protect them from the predator. Can anybody explain this to me?
No, I cannot.
To be fair, they don't know that the predator's coming to kill them because up until that point, he hasn't killed any humans. He's after the fugitive predator, and then he's after destroying the device. He hasn't killed any humans.
Yeah, I don't think any of these people are distinguishing between the mega predator and the regular predator. I think they just think those predators are coming to kill humans.
I don't know. I also think they're escaped like convicts basically, so they're not really eager to get along with anyone. I feel like they're interested in like like survival and little else. Like, I don't think they care about these other characters.
But I think for survival, you'd want to have as many people there to.
Yeah, but they're called the loonies, so they're crazy. So I don't think they're like thinking reasonably.
Yeah, I think that's probably the
Sterling
true
McCrown's
answer.
character already made it very clear that he did not want to work with them, and he tried to kill them all.
Guys, I didn't like the ending of this movie.
No kidding.